This is my street in June 1944, Southampton. American soldiers came with their tanks and guns and camped on the doorstep. Of course, the children all loved it. It was like a picnic for them. So this is the way we lived in 1944. And then, 40 years later, it all happened again. Of course, it isn't quite the same. Even Rockstone Road has changed. It's now called Rockleigh Road. But we do have some Americans here today. And there's no shortage of nylons this time. Everywhere you look, there's a memory.
Give us some gum there.
Only this time, they're not real soldiers. They're not even real Americans.
You live local? You living here? First aid? Yeah? For broken hearts?
I still live in this street, and all this means a lot to me. David! That's my little nephew, David, getting to know the Yanks. My front room was spare, and I asked the officer in charge if any of the soldiers would care for the use of that. They were welcome, but he said on no account were they allowed inside. But they could use the loos, and we had no bathrooms at that time. But I didn't fancy them having a bath in front of my fire in a little tin bath. But the children have just as many memories as us old people. The little lass with the big bows is Anne Dyer.
Do you remember when this photograph was taken?
Yes, I do. We all had to get ready, didn't we?
Yeah, and it was very, very exciting for us because I don't think we'd had our photograph taken before. People didn't have materials for taking photographs, so it was quite a thrill. And I remember being very thrilled, and then Flo warning me as I got into the rope not to smile. I was 6, I'd lost my 2 front teeth, and it would show up, so there I am with my head down.
There's Tony Masters, the only one skipping. Do you remember Tony Masters?
Yes, I do. The cricket was for the boys and the skipping was for the girls, but that didn't suit Tony.
Well, Tony Masters grew up and went to Australia. But many of us stayed in the street, like my neighbour, Mrs. Nutland, at number 7.
40 years ago, just before D-Day, an American officer asked me to get up and clean my windows, and this is the photo.
And there's more memories across the road at number 8.
What I can remember, there was a group of us kids in the road, and this photographer came along and he said, "Would you like to play cricket?" And we all agreed yes. And this is me with my knickers hanging down. And don't I look a sight?
I was living in the street in 1944, and we used to, or at least I used to put them up in the shed and fix them up, and some of them used to sleep in the front garden. I always left the shed open so they could go in and out as they pleased. And when they were gone in the morning, you always found something on the bench there left for you, like a packet of cigarettes or something like that.
Most of the lads who are here today, dressed as soldiers, aren't old enough to remember the war, but they've done up their jeeps and tanks, and it's just the way I remember it.
Wow.
Well, we do have some of the real army here today. They're cooking a stew from the menu the soldiers had in June 1944.
Well worth waiting.
Well worth waiting 40 years.
And back in those days, I remember Janet Painter and Pauline Barnes as being a couple of little scamps.
Do you remember when the Americans came into the road, they used to shave their heads, be it voluntary or involuntary?
I remember them queuing up for haircuts because they were worried over lice, weren't they?
That's right, yeah.
And when they sat down, they never knew what they were going to get up with, and they would
No,
shave like
Mohicans
or
one
of the Union Jack on one of them, didn't they?
That's
Yeah.
right, yes, they did. Yes.
Wasn't that Yank there called Doughboy?
That's right.
Takes you back, doesn't it, looking at that?
Well, there's me on one end.
And there's me on the other, like two posts. I always remember them because they gave us gum, didn't they?
That's
I had a
right.
sister of 17 who was very pretty. My mother nearly kept her in under lock and key. We used to open the window and shout out, "If you throw us up some gum, we'll bring her to the window." And they used to throw the gum up and stand on these posts to talk to her. And we used to lay down under those windows there and listen to what they were saying.
My sisters used to bribe them or me, I'm not quite sure which way you'd put this, but they would say, "We've got an older sister, you give us some gum, we'll get her to come and talk to you," which they did very well out of. And we'd stand on top of the post outside of the doorway and sort of call up to the bedroom window in an effort to make you poke your head out to speak to them. I found them really quite a nice lot. One that I knew was a corporal. Again, his name was Andy. And he used to wait for me at the corner as I was going to and from work and shout out, "See you when you come home." And go onto the sports centre and play tennis because you couldn't go very far away in case the convoy was moved quickly. But he subsequently went off and he was also killed, so that was the end of that.
Those of us who lived here during the war, even the children, knew it wasn't just happening in our street.